Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns, the Anti-Federalist got it right here for the midweek update. So when I sent out the introductory program last week and said, hey, this is what we're going to do, what are some ideas, I emailed it out to a lot of the different folks that are always interested in what Samuel Adams is up to, and got some replies and responses, and one that came back from Linda in respect to what's going on with virtue, courage, knowledge of the truth, and how does that all relate. So in respect to everything that has been going on this weekend and taking it all the way back to Founders' original intent, because I can guarantee you that the majority of people that entered into the activities and the continuing activities have no interest in really what America is all about and what it means to be a sovereign nation as well as a constitutional republic operating under federalism. That they don't care. You either have anarchist or you have the communist or you have all of the others of those various factions that, number one, have no moral continuity in respect to understanding of the terminology in such a way to activate or to promote their insanities or their belief systems, but they don't understand what it means to function within the concept of our republic. So with that, I thought that Linda's great question around what does it mean from a founder's perspective on virtue and courage and the knowledge of truth. So I put some things together, and just to go over them real quickly with you, I wanted to start where I always like to start is that, and we're going to talk about it more on Saturday's program, but the reality is that our nation has a very strong and substantial foundational belief system that comes out of the Judeo-Christian faith, okay? Flat out. And I can get into that, and I intend to get into that, into something else completely different from all of this. But from the preface of Barclay's Apology, Reverend Barclay wrote this. He said that, or he wrote, if you will, yet it is not read so generally, and this is the preface of Barclay's apology. So excuse me, let me apologize for where I started on the apology. But the preface in Barclay's apology is this: yet it is not read so generally as deserved to be, owing, it may be presumed, to its having been composed in a manner, though very suitable to the state of literature in the 17th century, yet not adapted to the state of reading in the present times. With some, and those not a few, the length of the work may be an objection, for which reason to families and persons unacquainted with the learned subjects. And yet these are the people, as has been elsewhere justly observed, who seem most to stand in need of a clear and judicious explanation of the principles of religion, on whom the practice of it should be enforced by the most convincing arguments. So this is true, and the key elements of what was said here is that a lot of times people make excuses on not reading founding documents and founders' intent because they say, oh, it's too hard to understand. It's not really that hard to understand. There's like things called dictionaries that can help you with the words that you don't understand. But I think more to the point of this preface is that sometimes the founders, Sam Adams, they wrote a lot. And to try and cram into 20 minutes what was very elaborately expounded on is very, very difficult because all of the historical context, everything else is wrapped into what they write. So to get it into, 128 characters on Twitter just is not going to happen. And to keep it within a 500 to 800 blog post is extremely difficult. And even here, trying to wrap this into a 20-minute video is extremely difficult. And it's interesting is that, as we've seen, is those that are out there protesting, carrying on, and even those that listen to this, or those on YouTube in other areas, or those that complain on Facebook and complain on Twitter, so on and so forth, what do they really know from that founder's intent and that whole fundamental basics? And there's so many that they really need it, and especially needing to understand the Judeo-Christian principles, the principles of religion that the founders understood. They need it, but you know what? They're not interested. They don't want it. They can't take the time for it. So many other things. But anyway, let's move on to that which Linda asked me about, virtue, courage, and knowledge of the truth. Well, virtue, according to Merriam-Webster's definition of virtue, is a conformity to a standard of right, a morality, a particular moral excellence. Wow, right there. So the first component of virtue, and to have virtue, is that we have to have a capacity to understand morality. Now, there's a lot of morality running around out there today, but I can guarantee you it's not the morality of our founders. In fact, a lot of it is immorality, especially when it comes from the definitions of humanism. So that's pretty much where it starts. Oh, and one of the other definitions about number 3 that Merriam-Webster's has is that manly strength or courage. That's valor. Manly strength or courage. Isn't that sexist? Well, no, it's not. It's very interesting, because we're going to talk about what that means here in a couple moments. And you can go into some of the other ones. Virtue is chastity, especially in women. A capacity to act, a potency. Commendable quality or trait, a merit. Those are like the more modern definitions. But the first definition is substantial to the founder's intent, that being of a conformity to a standard of rightness, a particular moral excellence, a moral excellence. And then Wikipedia kind of drives it out on a civic virtue is the cultivation of habits of personal living that are claimed to be important for the success of a community. So now what we have is that virtue starts to develop into that initial self-governance and moral fabric that then has to have some kind of greater capacity in its service in the community. So civic virtues in a republic in particular have a historical meaning, and it's under a republican form of government that civic virtue can only be sustained. When you look at, obviously, what we're seeing in the anarchy and the I call it the revolution of 1917 of the socialist, communist, Antifada folks that are out there, they have no civic virtue whatsoever. And you can't do it in a monarchy, you can't do it in anarchy, and you cannot do it in despotism. It has to be in the context of a republic. And this is a form of decision making is considered superior to determining what best protects the interest of the majority. So that's what it's all about. It's not the whining minority that needs to be protected. They do, and that's part of what our government is about under our constitutional form of republicanism, is that the minority is protected. At the same time, though, the majority is definitely protected. Benjamin Franklin had a list of 13 manly virtues. Number 1 being temperance. Eat not to dullness and drink not to elevation. Number 2 is silence. Speak not but what may benefit others or yourself. Avoid trifling conversation. Wow. Wouldn't that be interesting on Twitter and Facebook? Number 3 is a manly virtue is order. Let all your things have their place. Let each part of your business has its time. Your business, anything that you're doing, so not just your business, but your daily business, let it have its time. So be disciplined in that. Number 4, resolution. Resolve to perform what you ought. Perform without fail what you resolve. In other words, if you give your word and you make a commitment, do it. Do it. Stand on your word. Number 5 was frugality. Make no expense, but to do good to others or yourself, waste nothing. 6 is industry. Lose no time. Be always employed in something useful. Cut off all unnecessary actions. That makes sense. So this is part of being manly and manly virtue. Sincerity. Use no hurtful deceit. Think innocently and justly. And if you speak, speak accordingly. Wow, wouldn't that be interesting in all of this stuff that's going on? Sincerity. Use no hurtful deceit. I think I just said that one because maybe it's that important. 8 is justice. Wrong none. By doing injuries or omitting the benefits that are your duty. 9 is moderation. Avoid extremes. Forbear resenting injuries so much as you think they deserve. Let's see. 10. Here's one for some folks. Cleanliness. Tolerate no uncleanliness in body, clothes, or habitation. Wow. Kids, learn how to keep your room clean. 11. Chastity. Rarely use venery, but for health or offspring. Never to dullness, weakness, or the injury of your own or another's peace or reputation. 12. Tranquility. Be not disturbed at trifles, or at accidents common or unavoidable. Wow, tranquility. Do you have any tranquility? Here's one, number 13, for your manly virtues. Humility. Imitate Jesus and Socrates. That was from Ben Franklin. And, we have to move on quickly to courage. Now, courage is something that is very interesting. Courage is also called bravery or valor. Oh gosh, that's kind of interesting. Virtue, you get to valor. It is the choice and willingness to confront agony, pain, danger, uncertainty, intimidation. So, what is it to be courageous? That is so tossed around. But when we get into what it is to be courageous from the founder's perspective, and when I search through many of my, hundreds, if not over 1,000 plus original writings of the founders, and I kind of narrowed that search into the 1700s, courage is only used maybe 5, 6, 7, no more than a dozen times. The word that really comes out is fortitude. And when you look at the 1700s, the classical virtue of fortitude is also translated as courage, but includes the aspects of perseverance and patience. So fortitude. And fortitude, it's a cardinal virtue. So courage and fortitude include that forbearance, strength, endurance, the ability to confront that fear, uncertainty, and intimidation. So when we start looking at that and how it takes and translates into a number of different things, fortitude was assigned to the warrior class and to the spirit and element in a man. Strength of mind that allows one to endure pain or adversity with courage. Fortitude is even a biblical perspective. Let's see, the origin of fortitude in Middle English is really from the Latin, and it is all part of even in the Indo-European roots. As nouns, the difference between courage and fortitude is that courage is the quality of a confident character not to be afraid or intimidated easily, but without being incautious or inconsiderate, while fortitude is mental or emotional strength that enables courage in the face of adversity. Really interesting. And I thought that when we look at it, that's really what the founders were talking about in most of their writings. They used fortitude So it started with that mental perspective and just didn't get out there. And all of these people that are boisterous and fluffing their feathers and going out and standing against this or saying against that, they don't have any courage. They have no courage whatsoever when you look at the fundamental definitions of what it is. It becomes extremely interesting. So some synonyms for fortitude is mental or emotional strength, inner strength, moxie, and resolve. Okay, and Webster's dictionary brings it from this interesting fact that names of two stone lions in front of the New York Public Library are patience and fortitude. They were named by then Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia. Fortitude, power to resist attack, strength and firmness. Fortitude of the place is best known to you. So fortitude is something that's inner, that the strength or firmness of mind which enables a person to encounter danger with coolness and courage, to bear that pain and that adversity. And we can go on, is that I think it's real interesting in the Century Dictionary Encyclopedia. Fortitude is strength, it's force, power to attack or resist attack. Fortitude is a mental power of endurance, and it goes on from there, and it is all about endurance. So when we start looking at the virtue and courage, it comes to what we saw with the founding fathers, is that they understood that they needed to have a moral capacity first and foremost. And Sam Adams and many of the others, because they had very strong biblical understanding, they were able to take and understand how that whole idea of virtue was in relationship to what God's gifts and what that meant. And also then when you look at fortitude being also a gift, as is related biblically from a gift of the Spirit, as well as what is in out there naturally, but is also enabled as a gift of the Spirit, it becomes extremely interesting that those that understood the biblical truths and were able to look at that in that whole workings of society and looked at inner virtue from self-governance, from understanding those truths, were able then to apply it into what? Into that whole idea of civic virtue, and defining that as we looked at it, and working that into what it meant then to have fortitude and courage to stand up against tyranny. And that's what our founders had to do. That's what Sam Adams had to do, was be able to first off understand all of that within, and then be able to apply those truths, knowing that by the gift of God they could have that fortitude to stand in adversity against tyranny and despotism, and thereby look at what it would be to bring in those consistencies and continuities in governance into the American view and the American culture. So as we just wrap this up, I'll ask you again to submit some ideas to Tom at SamuelAdamsReturns.com, and we'll take a look at them for next week's midweek update. And I'd encourage you to listen to the radio program on Saturdays at LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com or LWRN.net, as well as you can find the archives on SamuelAdamsReturns.net, and also on this YouTube channel you can get the video component of it as well. So thanks again, and you know what? Do you have the moral courage? Do you have the moral fortitude to look at the truth and stand on that with an understanding of founders' original intent for what it means to have our constitutional republic?